In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the face of the deep. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw that the light was good. Darkness is essentially the absence of light. Kind of like our discussion of silence last week. There are some who like silence. There are some who like darkness. And not necessarily for wrong reasons. As I reflect on that, it seems like it's especially the people who don't have much silence in their life, who long for silence. If they're always around noise, sometimes it is good to come away and experience the quiet. Someone reflecting on last Sunday's message was talking about how he never turns the radio on in his car, even if he's got a couple-hour drive, because that's silent time, that's thinking time, that's reflecting time, and that we need that in our lives. But I don't think we would thrive on total silence. And especially when it comes to needing to hear from someone, needing to hear from God. We understand that it was in that silence, in what seemed to be the absence of communication, important communication, that a voice broke the silence, if you will. Not that God had been absent. God had spoken, but the experience of God on the part of the people of Israel was an experience of silence, and God did not seem to be speaking about their current needs and their current situation, and was not bringing new word to bear upon their struggles. And for some 400 years, it seemed as though God was silent. Well, darkness. Sometimes, for some, darkness is something we enjoy. Darkness can speak of quiet, of comfort, of reflection, of rest. Kind of like the silence, a way of shutting out other things and just kind of enjoying a lack of visual noise, if you will. But at its best, darkness is generally enjoyed most, even by the people who like it. Generally enjoyed most in front of a fireplace, or beside a candle, around a campfire, out driving at night with all of the Christmas displays, or under a starry sky. For many, however, for most perhaps, the idea of darkness represents fear and uncertainty, a sense of lostness or confusion or despair. Mystics, poets speak of a dark night of the soul, of just this sense of darkness that can almost creep in to our very being. I want to suggest that as human beings, we were not created to live in the dark. In the beginning of creation, darkness covered the face of the deep, and God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. At a very basic level, we need light in order to see. Our eyes physiologically need light to be able to see. And I believe it's this principle that leads us to a deeper understanding of the concept of darkness throughout Scripture. Isaiah 9 that we read this morning has that familiar prophecy, a people walking in darkness have seen or will see a great light. To walk in darkness. What does that mean? It could mean to walk in the midst of darkness. And I believe there were people in Isaiah's day who understood truth. People in Isaiah's day who could see, but they lived in a world, they live amongst other people who seem not to be able to see. I want to suggest that to walk in darkness means to walk without seeing. To essentially be blind. To walk without seeing is to walk without knowing. It is light that brings knowledge. Light brings understanding. Light represents truth. We talk about the dark ages. It's not because there was no sunlight. We're not talking physically. We're talking about an age of superstition, an era where it seemed like a lack of knowledge characterized a period of several centuries. People walking in darkness. Yes, some perhaps who understood, some perhaps who knew the truth and were waiting for that truth to be revealed, and yet their setting, their circumstances, the people, the world around them seem to be characterized by a lack of understanding. People walking in darkness could also speak of people who simply don't know the truth about God. I think that's probably more what it's talking about. Walking in darkness, walking without eyes to be able to see God, spiritual eyes to see God. Now, of those people who don't know the truth about God, some of them perhaps are seeking. Some want to know, want someone to tell them, want light to come into their life. Then there are probably those who don't know the truth and don't know that they don't know. I think of Jesus in relation to a healing of a man who was born blind, and the frustration of the Pharisees at that healing and their anger about it. And as they interrogated the man who was born blind, who had been healed, and as Jesus then processed that, as he later talked to this man and then kind of gave application of this whole event that had transpired. He said there are none so blind as those who think they see. People walking in darkness. People who don't know the truth about God. Some of them want to know the truth about God, waiting for someone to tell them. Some of them don't even know that they don't know the truth about God. They think they see. They think they know all that there is to know. And then also among the people walking in darkness may be those who don't want to know the truth about God, who deliberately are antagonistic to the whole idea, who don't care to know, don't have any interest, as we read in the New Testament about the sense of darkness, that some are drawn to darkness because darkness covers, darkness hides. In John 3, it talks about those who reject the light because they love darkness more than light, because of the evil intentions of their hearts and their deeds. But Isaiah said the people walking in darkness, whether they wanted to see, whether they were longing for the light, whether they were trying to hide from the light, the people walking in darkness, light came into the world. Light light at least became available to them. John chapter 1 puts it in these words that interestingly echo Genesis chapter 1. Starts with the same words, in the beginning. John says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Nothing was made that has been made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. Some translations have that, the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, his name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning the light, so that through him all men might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light, the true light that gives light to every man, was coming into the world. Coming into a dark world. Yes, the world is still very much in darkness. The categories I described earlier probably fit us today as well. As we look at the world around us, we might say, yes, it is a very dark place. Constantly hearing on the news this tragedy, this mass shooting, this violence some other place. We're hearing lots of things that we would characterize as the absence of light. Pat talked about an area of Philadelphia, and I'm sure there are many of them, but an area in particular where they will be ministering, and it's known to not be very safe. It's kind of a dark place. And we understand how much of our world is like that. Just all the time, things coming to light. Areas of darkness in people's lives, things that maybe were once hidden that are coming to light that just, you say, when's it going to end? As we look at the world around us, there are people in the world today, even though it may feel like a dark place, there are people who know the light. There are people who live the light, people who are still living in the midst of darkness. There are also people who walk in darkness themselves. We might say those of us who God has revealed himself to, those of us, we are still may find ourselves walking in the midst of darkness, but we're not walking in darkness. You understand the difference? We may be surrounded by darkness, but if the light of Christ has touched our hearts and lives, that illuminates us. That illuminates our path. That gives us knowledge. That gives us understanding. That gives us wisdom to live this life, even surrounded by darkness. We may be walking in the midst of darkness. We don't have to walk in the darkness. People who don't know the truth about God are walking in the darkness. The same as being blind. Among those who don't know the truth are those who are seeking. Among those who don't know the truth are those who don't know that they don't know the truth. Among those who don't know the truth are those who don't want to know the truth. But the light has become available to all. The light has come into the world. We need to recognize our place now, in this time, as we have been so blessed to have that light touch us, not in any way that makes us proud. It's only by God's grace, it's only by God's mercy that knowledge has come to us, that our hearts have been open to receive it. And there's so much we can't understand, but it's not for us to boast that we see it and others don't. It's for us to rejoice that the light has come. It's for us to be humbly grateful that light has touched us. And it's for us to recognize our place in this world, to be reflectors of that light. To be reflectors of that knowledge, that understanding, that truth. To let that so affect us that we are living it out and that we are sharing it every opportunity we get. I believe it's in 2 Corinthians 4. Find the right verse here. It's talking about in the early part of the chapter, Paul's talking about how there is blindness. Deciding where to start here. It talks about how in verse 4, how the God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so that they cannot see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who's the image of God. Paul goes on to say, for we do not preach ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your servants for the sake of Jesus. He says, for God, the same God who said, let light shine out of darkness, has made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus. And then comes the verse, but we have this treasure in jars of clay, to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. In other words, we are like the lanterns. We are the clay pot that has this light burning inside. We are just bearers of the light. And as we allow that light to shine within us, and that can illuminate not only our path, but can illuminate others in this world. It's kind of like last week as we looked. In the silence there came a voice. 2,000 years later, in whatever silences there are, whatever corners of this world where there is silence, where there seems to be an absence of hearing of God, maybe you and I are to be that voice. As God has given his revelation to us, maybe we need to be that voice that breaks someone's silence, to speak a word of hope from God. In the darkness there came a light, and yes, this was a historic event that happened in real time, in a real place, as light came into the world in the person of God's Son, Jesus Christ. The world continues to be a dark place. But maybe now, God's purpose for you and for me is for that light that he has placed within us to be taken, and in the midst of someone's darkness, that we would reflect his light and bring them hope. I don't know where you are on the meter of being optimistic or pessimistic about the world around us. For those of you who think it's all rosy, there's plenty of darkness out there. Whether on a large scale or in individual lives, there's lots of people that need the hope of the light of Christ. And if you're one that says, oh, it's all doomed, well, you're right. There's reason to be discouraged. But maybe this morning you need that reminder that the light has come. The light is burning in hearts and lives all over this world. Every once in a while, we get a little glimpse of that light burning. It shows up in all different ways. Who's that TV news reporter, Hartman, is it, who does all these personal interest stories? You see one that was circulating this week about two little girls? Friends, twins, they called each other. I think they were probably about 7 or 8, 4. What do I know? 4 years old. They loved each other dearly. They dressed alike. It wasn't until finally they get to kindergarten or something and someone tells them, you can't be twins. Your skin's not the same color. certainly a sensitive issue in the world around us, in our own nation. But there in the midst of the darkness of racial tensions, two little girls who might show us the way. The first person to tell them that, you can't be twins. The girl with lighter skin started crying, and then she pulled herself together and said, well, we can be twins. We are twins because we share the same soul. There's an example, one example of a little dot of light in the midst of a dark landscape. There is hope in the midst of silence. There's been a voice, and because of that voice, we can be a voice today. In the midst of darkness, light has come. And because light has come, we can reflect that light and bring hope in the midst of a dark world. May it be so in your life and mine. May it be so through your life and mine.